Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not So Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season premiere of Superman and Lois, a great season premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So it's been a month after the events of the season 2 finale, and now everyone's trying to find their way moving forward. Obviously, the new Fortress of Solitude has been built. Obviously, it isn't just going to be for Clark to go to. It's going to be somewhere that the entire family can go. Obviously, them all getting introduced to their grandmother, Clark's mom. So, it's Laura, right? Laura L. Either way. But everyone's, picking up the pieces, continuing their lives. And so, obviously, I love the whole Clark and Jordan racing, and I love that Jordan's like, catch up, old man, and then, Clark, blow past him, and he, skips across the water, and ends up, apparently it happens, all the time. It's like, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Clark is older than you, he is stronger than you, he's been doing this a lot longer than you, so it's like, hey, I still got enough gas in the tank to whoop your ass any day of the week, kid. I think this is going to be the season Jordan really tries to, obviously he's been figuring himself out. I mean, it's been an issue, not an issue, but it's been a part of Jordan's story. I honestly, his entire life trying to figure his whole situation out, but especially upon his powers coming in development, and obviously last season, he really upped his, Superboy status. So even more so this season, I think he's going to try to come to terms of, is he ready? Is he not? Because obviously there was a situation, what was in Malaysia. No, I think the fortress is set up in Malaysia, but he was like, yeah, I kind of got turned around. I heard this crane situation was happening. And I thought that was so, cool, just Clark grabbing that one, and it looks like, oh, this one's about to fall. And I was like, oh, is Jordan going to swoop in and help him? And last guy's like, no, Clark just turns, boom, grabs it. It's like, yeah, let me show you how it's done, son. Because he knew Jordan was making a mistake, because Jordan tried to use his heat vision to, I think, melt the crane to kind of fix it back into place. But it's like, right, you cause more problems than you solve. And obviously Clark jumps down his throat for it, because it's like, hey, you shouldn't have done that. I told you to come straight home. For one, you don't know what you're doing. You're still an amateur at this. Two, yeah, you've been in some brawls and stuff like that, but you have to also think quickly on your feet, because it's also something Superman's really good at, is thinking quickly on his feet. It's a whole thing of does he have eidetic memory? Sometimes I think in the comics they've made it something like that, but he's also able to process stuff pretty quickly. I wonder, who processes stuff faster, him or Barry, just because of the whole super speed of it all. I don't know, Barry might be able to put him to shame, but I don't know, because obviously that's always a back and forth for, which one's faster. Probably not even just speed-wise, but probably even, intellect-wise and stuff like that. But, I mean, Clark's pretty smart, so he knows probably, what exactly I need to do to avert a situation. Once again, he's been at this for decades, whereas Jordan's just kind of getting his feet wet with the, yeah, it's been 3 seasons, yeah, but he's still in the process of getting his feet wet when it comes to this whole situation, so. But also, he hasn't done, he's just up there in regular clothes. It's you're doing what you're doing jeopardizes your secret identity, so that's also something that has to be considered as well, so. I do love that the parallels of both, parents, the super parent looking after the super kid, the normal human parent looking after the normal human child, because obviously Lois is teaching Jonathan how to drive, and I love that, just her kind of chastising his every move of okay, slow down, okay, you can go faster. It's just watch out, don't tailgate. And it's just oh, I don't think you're ready, because he's trying to get his, I guess, permit or license or whatever. But neither one of them, both of them are, I love that the advice they gave to each other, being well, maybe you should listen to Dad. Maybe Dad's right about you not being ready. It's, oh, maybe Mom, his advice should be taken, because she's been driving a lot longer, just like Dad's been Superman a lot longer. So I love that, them kind of helping and complimenting each other and being yeah, especially when Lois and Clark were man, our kids just don't listen to us. And it's right, it took them realizing yeah, we should probably listen to the respective parent that's trying to teach us right now. So, and I thought it was interesting too from Jonathan's perspective. And yes, obviously the elephant in the room being, obviously it's a new actor playing Jonathan. Kind of went into this knowing that fact. But either way, Jonathan saying he wants freedom, he's oh, getting my license or whatever, or even if it's just his permit, I think it's his license, just will be able to have some form of freedom, because I guess for him it's like at least Jordan can fly around and stuff like that. But I think with every, once again, everyone figuring out their place in everything, and in the family, just in the world in general, what they want for their lives, I think Jonathan's hoping for a little freedom, especially after everything last season. I did love that the driver ed teacher was the coach. It's like, cool. He's like, oh, I wonder why I had to get a second job, huh? Because you cost me like my football team or whatever. And so I was like, yeah. Luckily, Jonathan ended up passing regardless, despite the coach deducting points for his attitude or whatever. Jordan's still dealing with the aftermath of I'd actually forgotten the whole him and Sarah thing of like, oh, we're friends now. And it's like, yeah, trying to navigate that and the awkwardness around it, because it is an awkward situation. And it's like, yes, they care for each other, and obviously Jordan wants to be with Sarah, but Sarah's like, I gotta figure stuff out. I need to be on my own for a while to kind of figure me out before I put myself in a situation like that, So navigating that's going to be an interesting thing for them going forward. I did love that Lois and Clark are banging at Talro's place. It's like, right, I'd actually forgotten about that he's on Bizarro World, and it's like, oh, kind of getting back there, kind of checking up on him, and everything's going to be pretty hard. Because we even saw Sam, he was there with the military, and they, the DOD or whatever, and they shut down the mine. It's like, cool, we're making sure nothing else is residual, and yeah, let's make sure this mine is permanently shut down. But yeah, I think, is that the first time we've seen them kind of bang it out in the show? I think it is. Maybe? It's like, maybe in episode 10, which was kind of the pseudo flashback episode. Was it episode 10 or episode 11? It's the episode from season 1 where Talro was inside of Clark's head, but it was kind of like a flashback, which obviously comes back a lot more than, especially me referencing that, but we'll get to that later. But I was like, that might have been one of the times when we saw them kind of bang it out. But yeah, them kind of having fun, but then Lois ends up going to the doctors, which we'll circle back to that too. There's a lot I need to circle back to. But she thinks she might be pregnant, and that's something they've got to figure out, okay, is that something? I didn't think it was possible. Me neither. So what are we going to do? And what are they going to do? Obviously, they have to decide together. And Clark initially had his reservations about it. He didn't necessarily bring him up to Lois, but because both of them were trying to figure it out, because right, we both got 2 teenage sons already. Now, are we really ready to have another kid on the way? And it's like, both of them kind of interested into it. Because the conversation also has to be had, too, of well, we already, we had we kind of waited pretty late in life for Jonathan and Jordan to find out about Clark. So we also had to worry about, Jordan didn't develop any powers until he was a teenager. So who's to say this baby won't? I'm also thinking we know that Lois already sadly had a miscarriage. So that's why I was like, could the next child if it's a girl, it could be a Natalie situation, but they already named the child Natalie already. That was the one that sadly, so it could be another boy. I don't know. I'm curious. Jumping ahead a little bit, we find out, not a little bit, a lot, we find out that she's not pregnant. But like I said, it was just that journey of them both trying to figure out, what do we want to do? Are we ready to kind of go through this again? And especially when it's Jonathan and Jordan's 16th birthday, and you're looking back on that stuff, and that's what was finally enough to kind of push Clark over the edge to be like, yeah, this is what I want, fully. And especially Lois had a talk with Lana about it. And Lana talks about, that you kind of don't appreciate those little moments of holding them in your hands, because you're obviously you're out of your mind because you're tired and exhausted, and it's a lot. Especially in Lois's case, because the first time around she had 2, so she had to juggle that. So that's a lot. But even Lana suggesting if she could, she would want to have more too. Some other elements sprinkled in the episode, we had the Sam and Natalie storyline, which I thought was interesting, because they didn't have any at all real interactions last season, not to my recollection. So this was going to be their season to kind of really hang out, especially because she was pretty close to her grandfather. They used to watch horror movies all the time. Sam suggested hey, we should do that, but he's not really the horror movie type of guy. But the problem is he was also using this as an opportunity to recruit Natalie. And for Natalie, it's Like, I thought, like, you know, it's still that complicated thing of, like, right, you have the face and the same name and same voice as a person I knew that's gone, so it's almost like having you back, but it's always that stark reminder of, like, right, you're not my Grandpa Sam, you're not even my grandfather, so that reality is always kind of so heartbreaking and dashing. So when he got the opportunity, John Henry chewed Sam out. And, you know, we know Sam always has a tendency to lead with his military mind rather than kind of like his heart, kind of, you know, and he's been that way before. And obviously it's led to obviously him and Lois and Lucy, like their whole relationship being very complicated because of that. And so he kind of made that mistake here too, because he's like, right, he wanted to get to know Natalie, but he's like, right, I was just so caught up in it. Once again, just thought more military mind rather than, and he even admits later on to Natalie, I'm not good at relationships with people. Once again, we kind of know that, but it's like, yeah. And so he wants to, he does want to actually get to know her this time. It's like, I might not be your grandfather, but I would like to get to know you. So I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic to kind of pull, especially because John's reason for why he wanted Natalie nothing like during like no military or DOD programs or whatever. Because yeah, she's super smart, but he wants her to have a normal life, just like Clark and Lois want Jonathan and Jordan to have some semblance of a normal life, because it's all about balance, you know, especially in Natalie's case where it's like everything she's ever known is gone. And once again, there's, you know, that almost phantom limb syndrome of just, yeah, here are so many people with similar faces who are just reminders of what I've lost, because, hey, it's like you're here, but you're not, because they're complete strangers to you, because they're not the people that you know. And even if they are in some capacities, when they look at you, they always see as a stranger. So it's a complicated balancing act that Natalie still has to deal with. But I think she's in a better place, but especially because John Henry wants her just to kind of branch out and make more friends. Interesting enough, speaking of John Henry, he had referenced his sister before, but I think this is I'm pretty sure this is the first time she's popped up in the show. That actress, I was like, isn't that the actress who played? Because she looks so familiar, and I was like, I could be mistaken. I think that's the mom from. Cause I was confusing her with a different actress for a bit. I was about to say, I was like, because I'm pretty sure they're not the same actresses. I was about to say I thought she was, oh God, I'm so terrible with names, from Motherland Fort Salem. I thought she was it Petra? But I thought that was her, but I'm fairly sure. I think that's the actress who played Alex's mom in Marvel's Runaways on Hulu. I think so. It might be. It's not the same actress, but I want to say, because I was like, looking at her, I was like, she looks so familiar, but I that's what I say. I think I'm confusing them. I want to say it's the actress who played Alex's mom on Runaways. So if it is the same actress, which I think it is, that comic book connection there is kind of interesting. Once again, just on the aisle, going from Marvel to DC. She's an actress where it's like, I feel like I was like, other than that, I feel like I've still seen you in other stuff, but it's like, that's the first thing that comes to mind. I think that's like the most recent thing I'd seen her in. I don't know. But we learned a lot of interesting things about the John Henry Irons of this world, his connection to Bruno. That it's like, yes, everyone in their family served the military, except, well, he was a military person too, except he was more on the bad side of things, because it turns out he sold weapons to some bad people, like a Bruno and a Lex Luthor type of situation. So it's like, I don't even know to me, it doesn't matter who killed my brother, because at the end of the day, did I even really know my brother? He wasn't the man I thought he was. So that's going to be interesting and complicated. I mean, obviously John Henry is going to do everything he can to avoid being around her, but it is still a thing of, if she just happens to catch it, like happens to be around Lois around the time John Henry is, that's going to be a whole thing. Not unless John Henry shows up because he tries to save his sister, because maybe someone comes after her thinking she knows something more about all that stuff. It's like, oh, she's known nothing for all these years, but now we think she might know something, so we might come after her now. Not unless that, because those two have to meet at some point in time in this season, but maybe not, or at the very least he watches them from far, because he was going to initially, he was tracking down his sister back in season 1, right? I believe. Or was that last season? I'm fairly sure that was season 1 he was tracking down his sister, and he did, but he never interacted with her before he got called back to Smallville. Really quickly, going to talk about some of these couplings we got. Like the moment, poor Kyle, he's in this complicated spot because I mean, yes, he cheated. You know, his relationship and his family, like took a hit and stuff. But he was talking to Lana like, "Oh, like you're going to sign those divorce papers?" She's like, "Right, I'm just so busy, I haven't had an opportunity." I read that, at least that look on Kyle's face, he kind of felt like he was in a purgatory right now because it's like this, like it's that thing of like, if she signs it, at the very least, I'm at least I know it's over. Because Lana made it clear that she doesn't think there could ever really be a them. Obviously, we can co-parent and stuff like that, but an us as a couple might not ever be an option again. So for him, it's like maybe there's also that part of him is like, well, the fact is, if she's putting it off for so long, maybe she's considering us being back together as a thing. So he's in that complicated purgatory of like, I don't know what it means, and I think it is kind of a little bit of hell that he's kind of put through. And I don't think I'm not saying Lana was doing that on purpose or anything. I'm just thinking like, right, she has caught up with being mayor and stuff, and so she has a lot to juggle, so she hasn't had an opportunity to look into that. And he was saying like, oh yeah, my lawyer was kind of, pressuring me about that, but I think Kyle probably was trying to get the temperature, like trying to get Lana's temperature to see like, hey, like what's going on. I was wondering if there was going to be more of that, like, mold at the school thing, but I think that kind of folds into the Dean storyline where he was like, yo, you shouldn't have touched that money, which I'm immediately like, oh, cool, so Dean was paying somebody off, some very bad people, and I don't know if it has anything to do with Bruno or not, but there were some bad people associated with that. That's someone else's money you're touching, like, I guess it was either like meant to be a mass payment or maybe he was holding on to someone else's money. But he was like, Lana, you shouldn't have touched that. You have no idea what you're mixed up in. It's like, well, it's your fault for like putting Smallville in the situation that is in, being the crappy mayor that you were. So it's all on you. Don't put it on Lana for her not knowing about your shady dealings and your shady past, But anyway, but back to the Kyle thing. The fact is he saw Lana and John Henry Irons kind of like talking, which I'm like, I was kind of getting those vibes last season. I'm like, are they setting that up as a thing? And we got like one episode kind of potentially hinting like that. Like, I don't know, like it just seemed like hey, neither one of you both have complicated relationship statuses with people in this world. The complicated thing between him and Lois and Kyle and Lana. But then, like, the moment, I felt so bad for Chrissy. Like, she's at the party and she's like, yeah, I got you an alarm clock, Jonathan. She's like, yeah, I'm going to dance like it's 1999 or something. And I'm like, you feel so awkward and out of place. And then she's just like, right, I literally have like, for her, it's like, this was the only thing on my calendar was 16-year-old's birthday party. She's like, how low is that? It's like, well... He's like, Kyle's like, well, you could always compare it to my daughter's quinceañera. And it's like, ooh, that was brutal. It's like, yeah, I think I take the cake here. But the moment that happened, I was like, are we setting up a Chrissy? And I mean, also, because it's also the thing of like, that's a little weird too, because it's like, you also know that Kyle's a cheater too, so that's gotta stain things a little bit. But it's like, hey, we were both low and we randomly hooked up, and Chrissy's like, yeah, that was fine. I mean, yeah, it was good. It was yeah, but it's like, yeah, that can never happen. We can never mention it. It's like we're already in an awkward situation. Then you add in the fact is, I was like, I was like, I didn't think it was going to turn into anything, even if Lana knew that Chrissy was there. I mean, the last thing he wants, especially because he probably thought like, oh. He was still probably potentially holding out hope, but Lana gave him the divorce papers. Like I said, I don't think his lawyers were really asking for it. I think he was, like I said, trying to read the room, the temperature, trying to figure out where him and Lana fully stood, like if there was any hope. Which obviously you can even parallel that with like Jordan and Sarah. But the sad thing is, like, obviously that happened, and Kirsty's just kind of standing there, and I love when she goes back into the office, everyone's like, what's wrong? She's like, what? Nothing's wrong. Everything's fine. And they're both, like, Lois and Clark are looking at each other like, what's the hell is that about? But either way, the main threat this episode ended up being, if I'm not mistaken, and this was I was talking about earlier, about, like, that episode where Taro got inside of Clark's head, and we saw kind of like, it was kind of like a past episode, like kind of an episode of kind of early days of Clark and Lois, like how they kind of first like met and stuff face to face, and her giving him the name Superman. if I'm not mistaken, the guy he fought in that episode, the kind of Nazi-ish dude, that's the dude he fought this episode, right? I think it is. And it's like, wait, you have powers? He's like, yeah. So, and I love that shot of Clark, like, getting thrown into that tanker or whatever, and then, like, walking out in the flames. I'm like, oh, I love that. Because that's one, like, I've talked about it time and time again. That's one of my favorite scenes in, was it Batman v Superman? When, like, the courtroom is on fire and Clark's in the middle of it as Superman. And, like, it's just, like, that regret on his face, like, I feel I didn't see this coming. It's too late. All these people are dead, and I'm the one. And smack dab in the middle of this burning courtroom, this exploded courtroom, and I'm untouched. I'm not hurt. Everyone else around me is dead. Like, the symbology of that scene and just how it was shot, I was like, oh, that was such a beautiful scene. And it kind of reminded me of that a little bit. And him and this guy, like, tussling around the city. Once again, I love let's smash through some buildings, smash through, like, a unfinished road. But the guy's kind of unnerved and being like, yo, I gotta do this before it's too late. And it's like, wait, what? And during their fight, the guy gets shot, but Clark's like, uses x-rays and is like, no, that doesn't make any sense. The guy, there's no bullets. I'm like, then what the hell did he get shot with? What? And then we see someone in, like, some spiral mask. I'm like, what the hell is that? Clark goes off because he starts hearing all these other sounds, and it sounds like it was multiple people being targeted. Like, it sounded like people were in trouble everywhere, but then, like, all of a sudden it went dead silent. So I'm like, was that person in the mask messing with Clark's head? Like, did they get inside his head and make him hear things that weren't there? Like, is that going to be like a hallucinogenic, like, character where it's like, oh, I can make you see and hear things that aren't really there type of thing? Because when he came back, they were going along with the body. So, and then Lois later on finds out, like, oh, home dude was, like, sick, so he got released early because, like, he didn't have that much time left, and apparently that was 3 months ago. And it's like, so he just suddenly pops up after being released from prison, like, 3 months ago. Like, why? What was that? And we get the end of the episode where I was like, the moment I saw the guy who is, it seems like it's Bruno, I was like, wait, isn't that? And so the actor's name is Chad Coleman. The thing I know him from is he played Tyrese in The Walking Dead. That's actually, because I didn't know the actor's name off the top of my head. That's actually how I found his name, which I just Googled. I knew that would help. So I also Googled who plays Bruno, and it is the same actor, Chad Coleman. The interesting thing is he has a DC connection. I mean, maybe there's others, but this is one I definitely knew. I was like, if that's the same actor, wasn't he in Arrow? Yes, he played a character, Tobias Church, in Arrow. Granted, he was only in there for 4 episodes, so at first I was like, could this be like he plays like a different Earth version of that character? But it's like, no, like this character's named Bruno. I guess it's because it's like this is on a different Earth. It's a separate continuity from the Arrowverse continuity. If I remember correctly, he died in, wasn't it like a season, I didn't pay attention to the date. Was it season 5 that his character Tobias died? Maybe? Because I remember it was like a shuriken to the neck that killed him. I'm trying to remember who was it. It might have been Adrian Chase, aka Prometheus. I mean, yes, Adrian Chase is Vigilante in the comics, but in Arrow, he was Prometheus. So I was like, he might have been the one that killed. That might have been, so, because if it was Prometheus, it had to be season 5. But now part of me is wondering, could it have been like a season 6, like Michael Emerson's character? Like, I don't remember. I feel like it was a Prometheus death, but nevertheless, either way, like he's the main villain this season, so that's interesting. Once again, like I said, it's a different Earth. You can skirt around that without having to really worry about it. It's the multiverse. But I'm curious to know what his whole deal is. It seems like he's just a normal dude. Like, oh, I'm a bad guy. I'm part of Inner Gang. I'm just a really, I'm like Lex Luthor. Like, I'm just a maybe powerful dude in that regard. I don't have any actual powers. Maybe. I took this tiniest glimpse. I just saw what he looks like in the comics, the character. That's about it. But I know nothing. But he might be in that Lex Luthor, Max Lord, Morgan Edge type of lane, and obviously we saw what they did with Morgan Edge's character in this show, so who knows. But like, they end up resurrecting the guy. It's like, oh, he's dead, so it's not going to work. So whatever experiments they were doing, they could only do because he was alive before, but now he's dead. So it's like, I have no idea how to really make heads or tails of it. I mean, it's the first episode. We're getting the tiniest peek into all of this, so we have no idea what it's fully about. There's also the thing with Lois too, which part of me wonders, is there going to be a correlation here? Because Lois was like, okay, like her doctor's like, I have no idea what's going on with you, because it turns out you're not pregnant, but I am kind of concerned about these symptoms. So now part of me wonders, is it she's going to be sick, and is there going to be some correlation with the main overarching stuff with Bruno? Maybe I don't know. I also think it speaks volumes about Jordan finally listening to his dad, that he heard his dad kind of tussle, like he heard the entire conversation, he heard the entire fight while he was with Sarah, but she's like, wait, is it something bad? And he's like, yeah, but she's like, are you going to go? And he's like, no, I'm not, because he was going to listen to his dad. It's like, right, dad says I'm not ready, and I'm not going to jump into something that's going to cause more harm than good. So I think that speaks volumes about like him learning, like, right, I can't, he'll probably still make mistakes and kind of jump into the fray at some point through this season, but the restraint there kind of speaks volumes, I think. But I think it might also get to the point where Clark might have to like put aside his reservations and be like, right, I don't know whether there's going to be a situation where he calls Jordan because he has no choice, or whether there's going to be a situation where now I'm calling you in because I know you're ready and I need your help. So we'll ultimately have to wait to see where all this takes us. I don't know what to fully expect from this season. Once again, I watched the trailer like maybe a while back, and even then I forgot a lot of the context, and a lot of the context from the season trailers are usually taken from one episode. This one in particular was not. Like the trailer I remember seeing for this, the little bit I remember is like nothing from this episode. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That doesn't always happen. It's usually like taken from the first episode. So either way, I'm very excited to have Superman and Lois back. I'm very, very excited to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.